Alexander. What have you done to her? What did you give her? Sarah. Nothing, just some tea. She felt faint. Alexander. Chamomile tea. How very domestic. Were you planning on discussing her will next? Eleanor. Alex, stop it. This girl, she's been a friend. Are you pricing kindness now, Alex? Is that another one of your operational efficiencies? Sometimes the strangest encounters hide the most unexpected blessings. Did Sarah believe that? Not entirely. Life, in its often mundane rhythm, had taught her a cautious optimism, the kind that appreciated a warm cup of tea on a cold morning, but didn't quite expect a winning lottery ticket. Her world was one of polished floors and gleaming surfaces, the silent early morning hum of the Sterling Corporation's towering headquarters, where Mr. Alexander Sterling himself, a name whispered with a mixture of awe and trepidation, conducted his empire. Sarah, armed with her cart of cleaning supplies, was a small, almost invisible cog in this giant machine. Diligent, meticulous, she found a quiet satisfaction in transforming smudged glass into crystal clarity, in erasing the day's footprints from marble expanses. Today, however, the usual quiet of the grand, echoing lobby was punctuated by a rather unusual tableau. An elderly woman, petite and surprisingly spry, was a vibrant splash of colour against the cool corporate greys and blues. She was dressed in a slightly mismatched but undeniably expensive-looking silk blouse and a cardigan that had seen better decades. Her silver hair, while a little dishevelled, was caught at the nape of her neck, with what looked suspiciously like a vintage silver clasp, and she was, to Sarah's mild astonishment, attempting to feed a flock of rather bold city pigeons, with what appeared to be gourmet almond biscotti, right by the main revolving doors. A flustered security guard was trying very politely to dissuade her. "But they look so hungry, young man," the old woman was saying, her voice a charming, slightly reedy flute. "And this particular brand has such a delightful crunch. Surely a little treat wouldn't upset the corporate decorum." Sarah, pausing with her spray bottle mid-air, couldn't help a small smile. There was something undeniably endearing about the scene. She remembered a fleeting comment from her grandmother. A little bit of mischief keeps the heart young, Sarah. This woman, whoever she was, certainly seemed to embody that. The guard, a young man named Ben, whom Sarah often exchanged polite nods with, looked increasingly desperate. He caught Sarah's eye, a silent plea for, well, Sarah wasn't sure what intervention, distraction. Taking a breath, Sarah approached her worn sneakers, squeaking almost imperceptibly on the polished floor. "Excuse me, Mum," she began, her voice soft. "Perhaps the pigeons would enjoy their treat a little more in the park just across the street. It's a lovely day for it." The old woman turned her bright, bird-like eyes, assessing Sarah with a surprising sharpness. Then a delightful crinkling smile spread across her face. "Oh, what a sensible idea. Dear, you see Harold," she said to the relieved guard. "This young lady understands practicalities. My son Alexander, he's all about practicalities. Tall glass boxes and spreadsheets. Not nearly enough biscotti in his life, if you ask me." Sarah blinked. "Alexander, as in the Alexander Sterling. Surely not. This charming, slightly eccentric lady couldn't possibly be. I'm Eleanor, by the way," the woman chirped, holding out a delicate, surprisingly strong hand. "And you are Sarah, ma'am, just Sarah." She took Eleanor's hand. It felt warm, papery like old parchment. "Just Sarah," Eleanor repeated, tilting her head. "There's no such thing as just Sarah, my dear. Everyone is a rather important someone. Now about that park." And so during her brief lunch break, Sarah found herself sitting on a park bench, sharing her simple cheese sandwich, while Eleanor, having successfully relocated her pigeon-feeding operation, recounted a series of delightfully rambling anecdotes. She spoke of gardens she once tended, of a husband who loved to waltz, and of a son who, while brilliant, sometimes forgot that the world was painted in more colors than just black, white, and stock market ticker green. She never explicitly stated who her son was, but the way she spoke of his very tall building and his very important meetings left a faint, intriguing hum in the air. Eleanor, despite her slightly scattered conversation, possessed a keen wit. When Sarah confessed, she sometimes felt invisible in the grand scheme of the Sterling Corporation. Eleanor patted her hand. "My dear, the most important threads in a tapestry are often the ones you don't notice at first, but without them, the whole picture unravels. Besides," she added, a mischievous twinkle in her eye, "being underestimated can be a tremendous advantage. Ask any good poker player or a grandmother trying to sneak an extra cookie." Sarah laughed, a genuine light sound that felt good. It had been a while since she'd laughed so freely, a past encounter where her kindness had been misconstrued, as something else had left a small, wary knot in her heart. But with Eleanor, there was an ease, a surprising connection. As Sarah's break neared its end, Eleanor fumbled in her oversized handbag and produced a small, worn, leather-bound notebook. A few dried petals fell from its pages. "You know, Sarah," she said, her voice suddenly softer, more wistful, "if you're kind to a forgetful old woman like me who knows, sometimes the universe has a funny way of sending good things back to good people." She smiled, a gentle, enigmatic expression. "Perhaps you'll see me again." Sarah watched Eleanor amble off towards a waiting black car that seemed to appear out of nowhere, a chauffeur respectfully holding the door. A forgetful old woman. Perhaps, but Sarah had a feeling Eleanor remembered far more than she let on. And as she walked back to the silent, gleaming halls of the Sterling Corporation, Sarah felt a little lighter, a tiny seed of something planted in the usually predictable soil of her day. An unexpected tune indeed. A strange friendship blossoms from the most unexpected seeds. But is it strong enough to withstand prying eyes, and a world that often judges by the glint of gold rather than the warmth of a heart? Sarah was about to find out in the days that followed their first encounter. Eleanor became a quiet, intermittent ray of sunshine in Sarah's often predictable routine. She wouldn't appear every day, but when she did, often coincidentally near areas Sarah was scheduled to clean during her quieter mid-morning hours, it was as if a rare, colorful bird had decided to alight in the sterile corridors of Sterling Corporation. Their conversations deepened, meandering like a gentle stream. Eleanor, with her disarming blend of aristocratic vagueness and surprising astuteness, would share more about her boy Alexander. "He has a mind like a beautifully crafted watch, dear," she'd say carefully, wiping a speck of dust from a potted fern with a silk handkerchief. Sarah had discreetly provided, precise, efficient, always on time. "But sometimes I do wish he'd remember that life isn't just about keeping the gears turning. It's about, well, listening to the birds sing, even if they are just city pigeons with questionable table manners." Sarah, in turn, found herself opening up about her own small world, her dreams of one day having a tiny balcony garden, her quiet passion for baking simple cakes. Eleanor listened with an attentiveness that made Sarah feel truly heard. Once Eleanor, with a mischievous glint in her eye, insisted on assisting Sarah with polishing a brass plaque. Her efforts, though well-intentioned, resulted in more polish on her silk blouse than on the plaque, and a shared fit of giggles that echoed briefly in the otherwise somber hallway. "Oh dear, Eleanor," chuckled, dabbing at her sleeve. "I dare say I'm better at directing a gala than wielding a polishing cloth. Alexander would have a fit if he saw this. He likes things operationally optimized. You know." Meanwhile, in the upper echelons of the Stirling Tower, Alexander Stirling was indeed having a fit, though not about misplaced polish. His mother Eleanor was, for all intents and purposes, missing, or rather choosing to be temporarily unavailable without adequate prior notification, as his meticulously efficient personal assistant, Miss Albright, phrased it. Temporarily unavailable. Alexander's voice was a low growl, a stark contrast to his mother's lilting tones. He paced his expansive office, the city skyline, a glittering, indifferent backdrop. "She's been temporarily unavailable for 3 days, Albright. She's not answering her phone. The staff at the penthouse report she simply walked out with a handbag and a rather cheerful wave. This isn't like her." Well, it was and it wasn't. His mother had always possessed a whimsical streak, a quiet rebellion against the gilded cage her life had sometimes become. But this felt different. "We have a lead, or," Stirling Albright said, her voice calm. Her tablet, held at the ready security footage from the lobby, shows Mrs. Stirling interacting with a member of the cleaning staff 2 days ago. And again, briefly yesterday, they were also seen in the adjacent park. Alexander stopped pacing. "Cleaning staff, who get me a name, a file. What did they talk about? Is this person influencing her?" His mind, trained to assess threats and opportunities, immediately jumped to less than charitable conclusions. Was his mother in a state of vulnerability being taken advantage of? Downstairs, Sarah's newfound camaraderie with Eleanor hadn't gone unnoticed. Linda, a fellow cleaner with a penchant for gossip and eyes that missed little, made a few pointed remarks during their shared coffee break. "Quite friendly with the fancy old bird, aren't you, Sarah? Looks like she's got money. Maybe you're hoping for a generous tip." Sarah felt a flush creep up her neck. "She's just a nice lady." "Linda, she seems a bit lonely. Lonely and loaded more." Like Linda snorted. Even Mr. Henderson, the usually affable cleaning supervisor, had called Sarah aside. Sarah, he'd said, his brow furrowed. "I don't want to tell you who you can or can't talk to on your break. But Mrs. Stirling... Well, she's Mr. Alexander Stirling's mother. It's best to maintain a professional distance. We don't want any misunderstandings." The warning, though, gentle stung misunderstandings. It was the story of her life, it seemed. That old familiar knot of caution tightened in her chest. But then she'd remember Eleanor's bright eyes, her genuine laughter, the way she spoke of gardens and waltzes, and the knot would loosen just a little. The near miss happened on a crisp afternoon. Alexander, in a rare visit to the lower floors to inspect a new security installation, strode through the lobby. At that very moment, Sarah and Eleanor were tucked away in a small sunlit alcove near the west entrance, a spot Sarah often used for her quiet lunch. Eleanor was recounting a particularly amusing story about a prize-winning rosebush that had a temperament worthy of an opera diva. Alexander passed within 20 feet of them, his gaze fixed ahead, his mind clearly on other, more pressing matters. Sarah saw him, her heart giving a small, anxious flutter. She instinctively shrank back a little, hoping they wouldn't be noticed. Eleanor, blissfully unaware, continued her story. The moment passed, Alexander none the wiser. Later that week, as Sarah was sharing a thermos of her home-brewed chamomile tea with Eleanor, the older woman suddenly went quiet. A shadow passed over her usually bright features. "You know, dear," Eleanor said, her voice barely a whisper. Sometimes in a very large, very grand house, a person can feel like a ghost. A well-cared-for ghost, to be sure, with excellent catering, but a ghost nonetheless. Seen, but not always. Truly seen. She looked at Sarah, a deep well of sadness in her eyes. "You see me, Sarah, I think that's why I like talking to you." Before Sarah could respond, Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. She gasped, her face paling alarmingly. Oh my. She swayed and Sarah lurched forward, just managing to catch her before she slid from the bench. "Eleanor, what is it? Are you all right?" Sarah cried, her voice sharp with fear. At that very same moment, miles away in his sterile office, Alexander Sterling's private line chimed. Miss Albright's voice was clipped. "Efficient, Mr. Sterling. We have a confirmed visual. Your mother is currently in the West Wing Employee Lounge. She appears to be unwell, and the cleaner, Sarah Bellwether, is with her." When the fragile curtain of secrecy is finally violently torn down, does truth bring liberation, or does it only carve deeper, more agonizing wounds? For Sarah Bellwether, the answer was about to crash down with the force of a winter storm. The moment Ms. Albright's clipped words, "Your mother, unwell. The cleaner Sarah Bellwether is with her," registered Alexander Sterling moved with the decisive, almost brutal efficiency that had built his empire. His earlier anxieties about his mother's whereabouts now coalesced into a singular, laser-focused point of action. He didn't pause, didn't question further. He was already halfway to the door, barking orders into his private comm line. "Get Dr. Henderson to the West Wing Employee Lounge. Now, and secure the area. No one in or out until I get there." The journey from his penthouse office to the humble employee lounge on the service level was a blur of impatient elevator rides and long echoing corridors that his expensive Italian leather shoes devoured with angry clicks. His mind raced a maelstrom of worst-case scenarios, his mother frail, vulnerable, and with some unknown cleaner, a woman who had for days been an unknown variable in his carefully controlled world. Suspicion, cold and sharp, twisted in his gut alongside a genuine clawing fear for Eleanor's well-being. He burst through the door of the employee lounge, a small utilitarian room smelling faintly of floor polish and instant coffee. Like a thunderclap, the scene that greeted him seared itself into his memory. His mother, Eleanor Sterling, the elegant matriarch of one of the city's wealthiest families, was slumped on a worn vinyl couch, her face ashen, her breath shallow, and kneeling beside her, anxiously dabbing Eleanor's forehead with a damp paper towel, was a young woman in the simple blue uniform of the Sterling Corporation's cleaning staff, Sarah Mother. The word was a raw cry tearing from Alexander's throat. Eleanor's eyelids fluttered open. A weak smile touched her lips. "Alex, dear boy." Such a fuss. Sarah, startled by the explosive entrance, looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and concern for Eleanor. And then she saw him, Alexander Sterling. Not the distant, almost mythical figure from corporate newsletters, but a flesh-and-blood man, his handsome face, a mask of grim fury, his steely gaze fixed on her. Her blood ran cold. The pieces of Eleanor's vague pronouncements about her boy, Alexander, and his very tall building slammed into place with horrifying clarity. This was Eleanor's son, the CEO. Alexander was already across the room, dropping to his knees beside Eleanor, his hand surprisingly gentle as he took hers. "Mother, what happened? Are you in pain?" "Just a little dizzy, darling," Eleanor whispered, her eyes flitting nervously between her son and Sarah. "Sarah here. She's been so very kind." But Alexander barely registered his mother's words. His attention, sharp and accusatory, swiveled to Sarah. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, and in his eyes she saw not a flicker of recognition for the person who had shared tea and laughter with his mother, but only the cold assessment of a threat, a nobody, a cleaner who had somehow insinuated herself into his mother's life. He bit out his voice like chips of ice. What have you done to her? What did you give her? Sarah recoiled as if struck. Nothing. I mean, just some tea. Chamomile. She felt faint. Her words tumbled out, a flustered, inadequate defense against the sheer force of his suspicion. Chamomile tea. Alexander's lip curled. How very domestic. Were you planning on discussing her will next? The cruelty of the words, the naked disdain in his tone, struck Sarah to the core. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. This was a nightmare. The kind, eccentric old lady she had befriended, the one who had made her feel seen, was the mother of this arrogant, heartless man. Alex, stop it. Eleanor's voice, though weak, had a surprising edge of steel. You will not speak to this girl that way. Sarah has been a friend to me. A true friend. More than you know. She coughed a dry, racking sound. A friend. Alexander's incredulous gaze swept over Sarah's cheap uniform, her worn-out shoes. Mother, please. You're not well. This person. Eleanor interrupted, her eyes blazing. Now, despite her pallor, showed me more genuine kindness in 3 days than I've received from some quarters in 3 years. Are you pricing kindness now? Alex, is that another one of your operational efficiencies? The barb, sharp and precise, hit its mark, a flicker of something. Surprise, discomfort, crossed Alexander's face, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a renewed wave of controlled fury. He rose to his full imposing height, towering over Sarah. My mother is clearly not herself. He stated his voice, dangerously calm. I don't know what your game is. Ms. He paused as if her name was too insignificant to recall. Bellwether Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah Bellwether, Ms. Bellwether. Alexander continued the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. But I assure you, it's over. Security is on its way. Dr. Henderson will see to my mother. As for you... He gave a curt nod to Miss Albright, who had materialized silently in the doorway, tablet in hand. Albright, deal with this. Find out what she wanted, and make sure she's escorted off the premises. Permanently, no. Eleanor cried, trying to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced her back. Alex. You can't, but Alexander was no longer listening. He was focused entirely on his mother. His expression softening fractionally as he turned back to her. It's all right, Mother. I'm here now. You're safe, safe. The word echoed in Sarah's ears. Eleanor was safe. But Sarah felt as though the floor had just been ripped out from under her. The warmth of Eleanor's friendship, the brief, fragile hope of connection. All of it was shattered, trampled under the heel of a rich man's suspicion. Deal with this. Escorted off the premises. Permanently. The words were like a death sentence to the tentative bloom of joy she had dared to feel, Miss. Albright approached Sarah, her expression impassive. If you'll come with me. Miss Bellwether. Sarah could only nod, numb with shock and a profound, aching despair. She cast one last heartbroken look at Eleanor, who was now being attended to by a stern-faced man in a suit carrying a medical bag. Dr. Henderson. Presumably, Eleanor met her gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of apology and helpless anger. Then Sarah turned and walked away, the weight of Alexander Sterling's judgment pressing down on her like a physical blow. The bright, fragile melody of her friendship with Eleanor had ended not with a gentle fade, but with a discordant, brutal crash. And all that was left was the deafening silence of misunderstanding and the bitter taste of prejudice. After the storm of accusation and the raw exposure of truth, can any space be found for remorse? And in the wreckage of broken trust, can dignity not only be reclaimed, but also stand as a quiet, unyielding song? These were the questions that now hung heavy in the air, shaping the silence that followed the tempest. For Sarah, the days that followed were a blur of dull ache and a quiet, gnawing disillusionment. She hadn't been formally fired. Ms. Albright had simply informed her, in a tone devoid of any emotion, that her services were no longer required at the Sterling Corporation, effective immediately, and had handed her a severance check that felt more like a dismissal of her entire worth than compensation. She hadn't argued what was there to say. She retreated to the sanctuary of her small, meticulously clean apartment, the silence amplifying the echo of Alexander Sterling's harsh words. The memory of Eleanor's kindness was a bittersweet counterpoint, a melody abruptly cut short. Was this her reward for an open heart, to be judged condemned and discarded like so much refuse? Meanwhile, in the opulent but strangely sterile environment of the Sterling penthouse, Eleanor, having recovered from her dizzy spell under Dr. Henderson's care, was engaged in a conversation with her son, or rather a monologue punctuated by Alexander's terse, uncomfortable silences. She sat propped against a mountain of silk cushions, a delicate teacup in her hand, her earlier frailty replaced by a formidable regal calm. "You know, Alexander," she began, her voice deceptively mild for a man who prides himself on meticulous data analysis before any major acquisition. "Your assessment of that young woman, Sarah, was remarkably flawed." Alexander, standing by the vast window overlooking the city that was his kingdom, flinched almost imperceptibly. "Mother, she was a cleaner. You were unwell. I acted to protect you. Protect me." Eleanor raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Or protect your preconceived notions." "Sarah Bellwether, in the few days I knew her, offered me something your security details, your private doctors, and indeed, sometimes even your own good self, have failed to provide in abundance genuine, uncomplicated human connection." She took a delicate sip of tea. She listened. Alexander. She didn't want anything. She shared her meager lunch with me. She laughed at my rather silly jokes. She made me feel visible. Do you have any idea how rare a commodity that is, especially when one is, as you so delicately put it, getting on a bit? Her words, though soft, landed with the precision of expertly thrown darts. She even, Eleanor added, a faint wry smile playing on her lips, tried to teach me the optimal technique for polishing brass. A rather humbling experience, I assure you. Humility, Alexander. You might find it a surprisingly useful asset. It's not often listed on the stock exchange, but its dividends are considerable. Alexander remained silent, his jaw tight, his mother's words combined with the lingering image of Sarah's stricken face and his mother's fierce defense of her had begun to erode the foundations of his certainty. He had, as was his custom, instructed Miss Albright to conduct a thorough, albeit discreet, background check on Sarah Bellwether. The report had landed on his desk that morning, a slim file that spoke volumes. It painted a picture of a young woman of modest means, impeccable work ethic, no prior incidents of any kind, and a quiet history of small, unremarked kindnesses, helping an elderly neighbor with groceries, volunteering at a local soup kitchen when her schedule allowed. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, to suggest duplicity or ill intent. Only decency. The data, usually his most trusted ally, now felt like an indictment. He had been wrong, arrogantly, cruelly wrong. The realization was a cold stone in his stomach. He had not only misjudged Sarah, he had deeply wounded her, and in his panicked, high-handed dismissal, he had also dismissed his mother's feelings, her judgment, her loneliness. The next afternoon, Sarah answered a hesitant knock on her apartment door. To her utter astonishment, Alexander Sterling stood on her worn welcome mat, looking profoundly out of place in his tailored suit, his usual air of command replaced by an awkward, almost boyish discomfort. "Miss Bellwether?" "Sarah," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. May I come in for a moment?" Sarah stared at him, her heart a confused mix of residual anger, surprise, and a strange, unwelcome flicker of something else. She stepped back, allowing him into her tiny, spotless living room. He seemed to fill the small space, his presence overwhelming. "I came to apologize," Alexander said the words, sounding as if they had been dragged from him. "My behavior yesterday was inexcusable. I was concerned for my mother, and I reacted poorly. I misjudged you completely." He reached into his jacket pocket. "I understand the severance was standard. I'd like to offer you something more substantial as a token of my sincere regret for the distress I caused." He pulled out a checkbook. Sarah watched him, her expression unreadable. The sight of the checkbook, after everything, felt like another slap in the face. Was that all it came down to for him? Money to smooth over the cracks, to erase the offense. The old familiar fight for her own dignity rose within her, quiet but unyielding. She looked him directly in the eye. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice low but steady, devoid of the tremor he'd heard in the employee lounge. "I appreciate that it must have taken something for you to come here, but my distress, as you call it, isn't a commodity you can purchase." Alexander paused, his hand hovering over the checkbook. He looked genuinely taken aback. "I don't understand." "Don't you?" Sarah allowed a small, sad smile. "You didn't just insult me, Mr. Sterling. You questioned my integrity. You dismissed my character. You made me feel worthless. Do you think a check, no matter the amount, can simply fix that?" He had no answer. He looked down at the checkbook in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time, a useless, inadequate tool. "Your mother, Eleanor Sarah," continued her voice, softening slightly at the mention of her friend. "She shared her time with me, her stories, her laughter. That was valuable, Mr. Sterling. More valuable than any position at your company, or any amount you could write on that piece of paper." She took a breath. "If your apology is genuine, I accept it. But I don't want your money. I want it to be seen for who I am, not for what you assumed I was." Her words, spoken without malice, but with a profound, unshakable dignity, hung in the air between them. Alexander Sterling, a man who could command boardrooms and sway markets, found himself utterly disarmed by the quiet integrity of a young woman who had nothing yet possessed a richness he was only just beginning to comprehend. He slowly, thoughtfully put the checkbook back into his pocket. He had come to offer compensation. He was leaving with a far more profound understanding of the debt he truly owed. Can broken melodies, once discordant and harsh, truly find their way back to each other, harmonizing to create a symphony of understanding and a new dawn of hope? Alexander Sterling, a man accustomed to orchestrating financial markets, rather than human hearts, was about to conduct his most challenging and ultimately most rewarding composition, Sarah's quiet words in her small apartment had resonated with Alexander far more profoundly than any boardroom dressing down ever had. I want to be seen for who I am. It was a simple yet monumental request. He returned to his penthouse, not with the sting of a rebuffed offer, but with the sobering weight of a lesson learned. His mother, Eleanor, watched him with knowing eyes as he paced no longer with anger, but with a pensive, unfamiliar uncertainty. "Well, Alexander," Eleanor said gently after he recounted his visit to Sarah, "it appears your usual currency lacks purchasing power in the economy of human dignity. A rather refreshing discovery, wouldn't you say?" He stopped pacing. "She's right, Mother. I was an arrogant fool indeed," Eleanor agreed, a soft smile playing on her lips. "But even fools, my dear, are capable of learning new tunes. The question is, what will your next movement be?" Alexander's next movement was not a grand, impulsive gesture, but a series of carefully considered, quietly executed actions. A few days later, an internal memo circulated through Sterling Corporation. It was an apology penned by Alexander himself. It spoke of a profound personal misjudgment regarding a recent incident involving a valued member of their support staff, Sarah Bellwether, and his own mother. He acknowledged the exemplary kindness and integrity Miss Bellwether had shown, and expressed his deep regret for any distress his actions had caused. He stated unequivocally that she was a person of honor, and that any negative assumptions made were entirely his own error. The memo caused quite a stir. Linda, the gossipy cleaner, suddenly found her audience far less receptive to her whispers. Mr. Henderson read it with a slow, thoughtful nod. But Alexander knew a memo wasn't enough. Eleanor, with her usual subtle wisdom, had reminded him of Sarah's quiet mention of a dream, a tiny community bakery, a place where she could share her simple, heartfelt baking. "She has a gift for making things that warm the soul, Alex. Not everyone does. Such gifts shouldn't be wasted." Through a community outreach program that Sterling Corporation had until then mostly used for tax write-offs, Alexander arranged for a small, unused retail space in a decent neighborhood to be made available. He didn't offer it to Sarah directly. Instead, he funded a local small business incubator program, ensuring they knew of a particularly promising candidate with a talent for baking and a heart for her community. He then had Mrs. Albright, with uncharacteristic gentleness, inform Sarah of the program and encourage her to apply, making it clear it was a competitive opportunity she would earn on her own merit. Sarah was wary at first, but the opportunity presented respectfully and without any direct link to Alexander's earlier clumsy offer of money felt different. She applied. She poured her heart into her proposal, her passion for baking shining through, and she was accepted. Eleanor, meanwhile, orchestrated her own brand of healing. She invited Sarah for tea, not at the grand penthouse, but at a quiet, charming little botanical garden cafe, much more conducive to good conversation than those stuffy boardrooms, don't you think? "Dear," she'd said. When Sarah arrived, Alexander was there too, looking nervous and holding a small, slightly lopsided cake. He admitted he'd tried to bake himself as a peace offering. "It's supposed to be a lemon drizzle," he mumbled, looking rather like a schoolboy presenting a messy art project. "Miss Albright said you liked lemon." Eleanor winked at Sarah. "He's learning, my dear." "Slowly, but he's learning, though I dare say his talents lie more in spreadsheets than in sponges." Sarah, seeing the genuine effort, the awkward humility in this powerful man, felt the last of her defensiveness melt away. She laughed, a clear, bright sound. "Well, Mr. Sterling, it's the thought that counts, and I'm sure it's structurally sound." They shared the slightly disastrous cake, and for the first time the three of them talked, truly. Talked not as CEO cleaner and eccentric matriarch, but as three people finding common ground. Alexander listened more than he spoke a new habit he was cultivating. He learned about Sarah's vision for her bakery, a place that would not only sell delicious affordable treats, but also offer a warm welcome to everyone, perhaps even a small pay-it-forward scheme for those in need. In the months that followed, Sarah's Hearth, as she named her little bakery, began to take shape. It wasn't a lavish enterprise, but it was hers, built with her passion and a little anonymous, empowering support. Alexander, true to his word, kept his distance, but ensured the incubator program provided genuine mentorship. He found himself spending more quality time with Eleanor, not out of duty, but out of a newfound appreciation for her wit, her wisdom, and her company. He even initiated a company-wide review of employee welfare and community engagement at Sterling Corporation, no longer just as a PR exercise, but with a genuine desire to make a difference. His employees noticed a change, a touch more empathy, a greater willingness to listen. One sunny afternoon, months later, Eleanor and Alexander visited Sarah's Hearth. The little bakery was bustling, filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and cinnamon. Sarah, her face lightly dusted with flour, her eyes shining with a calm, confident happiness, greeted them with a warm smile. She didn't look like a Cinderella transformed by a prince. She looked like a woman who had found her place, her purpose, through her own strength and resilience, aided by a respect she had earned. Eleanor squeezed Sarah's hand. "It's wonderful, my dear. Absolutely wonderful. You've created something truly special." Alexander, looking around at the simple, heartfelt warmth of the place, finally understood. "You were right, Sarah," he said, quietly meeting her gaze. This is what real value looks like." Sarah smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. "It took a while for the melody to find its way, didn't it?" she said. "But it did." Eleanor added her own smile, radiant. "And it's a rather beautiful symphony now." And as they sat together, sharing a slice of Sarah's now famous lemon drizzle cake, perfectly baked this time, there was no echo of past hurts, no shadow of misunderstanding, only the quiet, harmonious notes of earned respect, unexpected friendship, and the enduring truth that kindness, however humble, possessed a power that could transform even the most discordant lives into something truly beautiful. The dawn had broken, bright and full of hope. What a journey that was, wasn't it? From a chance encounter, born of simple kindness, to a symphony of understanding that reshaped three very different lives. It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we pass by potential connections, potential moments of grace, simply because of the walls we build or the labels we so easily apply? Sarah, Eleanor, and Alexander's story reminds us that beneath the surface of our daily routines, and regardless of our stations in life, the human heart yearns for much, the same things, to be seen, to be valued, and to connect. Perhaps their story echoes something in your own life, or in the lives of those around you. A time when a small act of kindness had unforeseen ripples, or when a misunderstanding almost closed a door to something beautiful. This story left a deep impression on us, and we imagine it might have resonated with you too. We're always curious to hear how these journeys touch our viewers. What part of Sarah, Eleanor, or Alexander's transformation struck the deepest chord with you? Was there a moment you felt Alexander truly began to earn his redemption? Or was it a gradual process in your eyes? We'd love to read your thoughts and insights in the comments below. And speaking of thoughts, your feedback is incredibly valuable as we strive to bring you more meaningful stories. If you have any suggestions on how we can make our narratives even more compelling, or if there's anything about today's story you think we could have explored differently, please don't hesitate to share. We truly believe that storytelling is a collaborative art, and your voice helps us grow and improve with each new tale. If this story warmed your heart or gave you something to reflect upon, we'd be so grateful if you'd give it a like. And if you feel its message of kindness and understanding might resonate with someone else, please consider sharing it with them. To continue exploring more journeys of the human spirit with us, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell. That way, you won't miss out on the next story we're excited to share. We believe every story holds a unique magic, and we're thrilled to discover it together with you. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, may you find kindness in unexpected places, and may your own story be filled with understanding and hope.